What's up, guys? Welcome to the Final Drive presented by Microsoft Surface. For Hayley Elwood, I'm Chris Hayre. On a day where the Chargers lose 31-30, I don't really even have any words for it. This is a day where the Final Drive, the name of this podcast, is just a bad name for a podcast.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it's happened a few times this season, and it happened again this time. And I think the hardest part about it happening right now is the critical juncture of where we are in the 2020 NFL season. This is week 8. The bye has already happened. To be 2-5 at this point and to have your second divisional loss, this is a game I think we've talked to, we've had conversations with each other on our podcasts and other media members and whatnot. And obviously every game you want to have. And as they sort of dug themselves into a bit of a hole, I think it was okay. We'll just kind of try to inch out of it. And that game last week against Jacksonville, that was a game that they obviously needed to have. This was a game that they needed to have because there are just so many implications, especially when you talk about the AFC West. This team is now 0-2 in the division this season. And that is just not, I could say not great. It's not. And there's really no way to sugarcoat that, unfortunately. But this is a game, again, a last second loss, just absolutely crushing, especially when for the majority of the first half of the game, they were just crushing it. And it felt
like they were in cruise control.
Yeah, they felt like they were absolutely in cruise control. And I guess that there have been other halves that have happened like that this year, but it felt different to me. It felt like they were just going to keep it on and the Broncos just didn't have an answer. And I don't know if it was the Phillip Lindsay touchdown that sort of shifted. Obviously, there were injuries at the end of the game, like Joey Bosa being evaluated for a concussion. That certainly made an impact. But this is a tough one. This is a really, really tough one. Like I said, mainly in terms of just where we are in the 2020 season and where this team goes from here.
Yeah, I feel bad for the players and the coaches, and I feel bad for the fans too. The last 4 weeks have not been easy, 4 games rather, when you lose 17-point leads to the Bucks and the Saints. You lose a 16-point lead to the Jags, you get it back and you win it. And you're up 21 against a divisional opponent, and you're playing just great football in the first half. And I thought the defense was flying around. You got the running game going, kind of that 3-headed attack. Troymaine Pope running really hard. Justin Jackson doing things through the air and on the ground. Joshua Kelly had a nice run in that first quarter or second quarter. And it just falls apart. It fell apart in the second half. And, again, I don't really have many words for it, guys. 2-5. This was a critical stretch. Hayley, as you said, you have an opportunity to get wins against the Broncos and Raiders, get to 4-4, put yourself back in the conversation. You got to throw that out the window now. There's no conversation. There's just trying to get out of this rut by any means necessary. And I don't have the answers for it. I don't think you have the answers for it. I think the team, they got to dig deep and they got to figure out a way to get a win and win in the division. This was something that we stressed. You haven't won in the division since 2018. You create your teams to win in the division, and they've been so close, but close doesn't get you anything in the NFL.
It doesn't. And unfortunately, when you talk about divisional games, again, we had this conversation this week. You throw the records out the window. You know what I mean? Because they always feel a little closer because these teams know each other. They're very, very familiar with one another. Obviously, the new wrinkle for the Chargers this year was Justin Herbert. And in that first half, Denver had no answer for him. Also, though, to come back from the interception he had on the, in the first series and to come back and show that poise and that resolve to compartmentalize that and move forward, that was incredible by him. And I give him props for that. But yeah, it's tough. It is really tough. And you talk about, we don't have the answers. Even Keenan Allen was kind of dumbfounded after the game saying, I wish we had the answers as to why these 1-score losses keep happening. And this is, I think, where teams kind of start digging deep and trying to find their identity and trying to figure it out. And that's definitely what is going to be needed, because not only did you lose this one this week to a divisional opponent, but you have another one on the schedule coming next week. You are back at home at SoFi Stadium, but the Raiders are coming into town next week, and they got a win today, and it's tough.
They won, and the thing I think that's most crushing are these divisional losses where,
Yeah.
they almost led wire to wire. I know the Broncos scored the first field goal of the game, but, the Chiefs game, you led wire to wire until the final gun in overtime. And to be so dominant against this team up until the final gun today. And then last year, you look at how the Chargers lost in Denver. They lost on a Brandon McManus field goal. You lose on a Brandon McManus extra point this year. So there's just a lot of similarities in terms of closing games. And I think each week you look at a phase of the team that needs to step up and help win a game. And, I don't know what happened to the defense in the second half. The running game got going this week, where in weeks past it hadn't gotten going. Michael Badgley was on this week, and he wasn't on the last couple of weeks. So it's getting all three phases on the same page, and I think that's what good teams do in this league.
It is what good teams do in this league. And there are other teams, I think it was the Chicago Bears at one point, where they had the flip. They had the flip side of they had 1-score wins instead of 1-score losses. And obviously they're in a different place right now. I believe they lost to the Saints today. But it's disappointing when you go up against the Jacksonville Jaguars and you put a complete game together, in the sense of you were even down at one point in the second half, but then they battled back and they sort of turned it on and kept it on. As Coach Lynn has said all season, when we have opponents on the ropes, we need to figure out how to knock them out. And they did that last week. But to not have them do that this week, it's just frustrating. I can't even imagine what it's like to be in that locker room. I mean, Mike Williams came up to the podium. He was clearly frustrated.
He didn't have words, Haley.
He didn't have words.
And you know what? Yeah. I don't blame him. He didn't have answers. And and I think it's kind of a helpless feeling when you lose like this and you can't put your finger on why it's happening. It's a helpless feeling. And, we could spend the next 10 minutes ripping off Justin Herbert, fun stats and what he did this week and everything. But it seems hollow right now. It seems hollow in losses. We know Justin Herbert's the future. We know he's going to be a really good player for a long time. He showed that today, but he admitted too. He had 2 turnovers that led to points for the Broncos. And when you lose a game by 1 point, everybody's responsible. So, he took responsibility for what he did today. But at the same time, 278 yards, 3 touchdowns from a rookie. And I'm trying to figure out how the Chargers defense, they allowed 2 yards rushing, I believe, in the first half. Yeah. And then you said it, Phillip Lindsay, 6 carries, 83 yards and a touchdown. That 55-yard touchdown, Haley, that kind of got the Broncos going.
Yeah, it certainly felt that way. It just felt like at that point they got their mojo back. And I mean, they were still down. It was 24-10 at that point after they scored. So they were still significantly down, but then they scored 7 after that. Then the Chargers had the field goal. And so I think too, one of the things when you look in the fourth quarter, I mean, unfortunately, the Chargers did settle for 2 field goals in that fourth quarter, where you obviously always want to capitalize on the touchdown and getting 6 instead of 3. And I know that there was the one red zone interception, I believe, where, Herbert threw the ball aimed for Mike Williams and it was picked off instead. And that was after a Rayshon interception so those two sort of like negated each other. 3 plays later. Yeah, exactly. In that sense. But yeah, I mean, they certainly Denver got momentum. They kind of kept going. And I guess you had hope, though, that after what you saw last week from the Chargers, that they would sort of, turn it around. But I don't know what it is. And again, I don't know, obviously I forget when Joey Bosa did go out at some point and was being evaluated for a concussion. That, to me, definitely has something to do with it, because if you're Drew Lock back there and you only have to account for really one of the 2 premier pass rushers on the Chargers, then you're probably going to take advantage of that. But yeah, it's tough. I mean, Coach Lynn even said after the game, like, he takes full responsibility. What they did today was unacceptable. And he even said, in terms of fans and all that, it's frustrating. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you know what? Bosa went out, Truman Pope went out, but also AJ Bouye went out for the Broncos too.
Yeah.
And he's their top corner. So it kind of evens out. There's really no excuses. You lose 31-30 to a divisional rival. It's extremely frustrating for fans, team players, and coaches. And you know, the only thing you could do, Hayley, is you get back on it, you practice, and you try to beat the Raiders, right?
And that's what Herbert said. He goes, we get back in, in the lab this week. We hopefully, assemble a good week of practice, put a good week of practice together. And yeah, you get ready for those Las Vegas Raiders who are coming off a win today, 16-6 over the Browns. Josh Jacobs, 128 yards. They had 208 yards rushing total, which is
It's a windy game.
Yeah, it was a windy game. I don't think it was 16-6. I mean, that is extremely low scoring in this league. But again, the Raiders have kind of turned things around this year. They've figured some things out. They've obviously had a couple games that, haven't gone well for them in that sense. But again, it's a divisional game. Anything can happen. To me, they're always a little closer than, like I said, than you think they might be. But it's tough. It's tough. But such as the NFL, it is a week-to-week league. You got to compartmentalize. You got to pack this one away. Look at the tape. Look at what needs to be fixed. Then slide it away and get ready for Vegas, because for Vegas coming in, I should say. They'll go to Vegas later in the season. But yeah, it's tough. It's hard to really, like you said, find silver linings in this one. Even Justin Herbert, to your point, had said, someone asked him, well, what about your performance and everything? And he said, it's hard. It's hard to stand up here when the team loses and ultimately, talk about how great of a game, I might have had or anything like that. So it's a rough one.
The stats, they mean very little when you're losing. And if you're frustrated, we feel you. We will still be here, though. Chargers Podcast Network going to roll. You got Playmakers Wednesday. Who you got?
I have Stacey Lynn, who is going to talk about the Lynn Family Foundation's great work that they do with our servicemen and women. November is obviously Salute to Service Month in the NFL. So they do a lot of great work with that. And because we are now in November, which is crazy when you stop and think about it, that here we are in the end of week 8 of the 2020 season, this crazy year.
Yeah, normally when we do this podcast, guys, it's light out, it's pitch black. It may as well be like 10 p.m. for me here.
That's actually one thing too. I was watching the game and I'm like, why do I feel like I need to start making dinner? And it was only like 3:15 or something like that. Yeah,
like Sunday Night Football.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Chargers Weekly, we'll preview the Raiders game. As fans, growing up, watching games, and when your team loses, Sundays are the worst. Mondays are the worst because you feel it, and then you slowly get into the next week. So you give it a couple of days. We'll have you covered on the Chargers Podcast Network. Appreciate you guys sticking around. We told you we'll be here, win, lose, or draw. Final drive presented by Microsoft Surface. For Hayley Elwood, I'm Chris Hayre. We'll see you guys next week.